They called her the Virgin Queen, a ruler who reigned for 44 years, commanding empires and hearts alike, yet died utterly alone. Why did England's most powerful woman, the symbol of grace, power, and divine destiny, refuse to love, to marry, or to bear an heir? What secret did she carry so tightly that she took it to her grave? The story begins not in the splendor of a throne room, but in silence, inside a marble tomb, where the name Elizabeth Regina still glows faintly beneath centuries of dust. Soft candlelight trembles across her effigy's face, carved so perfectly it almost breathes. But behind that stillness lies a storm that never truly died. To the world, she was England's shining light, its savior, its legend. But behind the crown and the golden gown was a woman haunted by whispers, whispers of deceit, of forbidden identity, of something unnatural. For centuries, scholars and skeptics alike have searched for answers, but every clue only deepens the darkness surrounding her. Was she protecting her country or hiding herself? Queen Elizabeth I ruled during what we now call England's Golden Age, an era of discovery, art, and unimaginable power. But beneath the poetry and portraits, there was a mystery too intimate for history to explain. She never married, she never produced an heir, and in the brutal world of Tudor politics, that was more than strange, it was dangerous. Every monarch before her had been measured by lineage. A queen without a husband was an anomaly. A queen without a child, a crisis. The court whispered, why does she refuse every suitor? What is she hiding? Some blamed trauma, her father's cruelty, her mother's execution. Others claimed divine devotion, that she married England itself. But then there were the darker rumors, rumors that stretched far beyond politics, into the very question of who Elizabeth truly was. Because in a small, quiet village west of London, an ancient story was already waiting. It spoke of a hidden death, a desperate cover-up, and a child who wasn't who she seemed to be. And if that legend were true, it would mean that the woman who ruled England might never have been a woman at all. You might think that sounds impossible, but history has always blurred the line between truth and myth, and sometimes it's the myths that hide the truth. What if the greatest queen in history wasn't Elizabeth at all? Tell me, if you uncovered a secret that could rewrite your nation's past, would you reveal it or let it die with you? As the winds sweep across the lonely hills of Gloucestershire, one place still whispers her name, a sleepy village called Bisley, and they say that is where the real Elizabeth died. In the next part, The Legend of the Bisley Boy, we uncover the night that changed England forever. They say the real Elizabeth died long before she became queen. Not in the palace, not in the tower, but in a quiet country village hidden beneath the English mist. And in her place, a stranger took her name, a child not born to rule, but forced to live a lie that would shape a kingdom. 85 miles west of London lies Bisley, a village so small it could be forgotten by time, if not for one chilling legend. The wind carries it still, past the moss-covered walls of Overcourt Manor, where a young princess once played beneath the apple trees. The year was 1543. Elizabeth Tudor, daughter of King Henry Roman VIII and Anne Boleyn, had been sent here to escape the city's sweating sickness, a plague that devoured London's streets. But in this haven of green fields and stone cottages, the future queen would meet something even deadlier, fate itself. The story begins like an innocent memory, a child laughing in the garden, sunlight spilling across her golden hair, and then silence. According to legend, the young Princess Elizabeth, barely 10 years old, fell violently ill while staying at Overcourt. Her servants prayed, pleaded, and waited for a miracle, but none came. In a matter of hours, the girl who would be queen was dead. The servants panicked. King Henry Roman VIII was on his way to visit, and everyone knew what that meant. The king's wrath was as swift as his sword. Heads rolled for far less. In desperation, they devised a plan mad, impossible, but their only chance to live. They found another child, a local boy who resembled the princess. Red hair, pale skin, delicate features. They dressed him in Elizabeth's clothes, braided his hair, and prayed that no one, least of all the king, would notice the difference. And somehow no one did. The boy, now known in whispers as the Bisley Boy, stepped into a royal destiny he never asked for. He became the ward of a throne, a ghost wearing a crown. Some say he was even a distant relative of Henry's bloodline, a bastard branch of the Tudors. That would explain the resemblance and why the deception worked. But what began as a desperate lie became the foundation of an empire. Because if the real Elizabeth died in Bisley and this boy survived in her place, then England's greatest queen was a carefully crafted illusion. For over 4 centuries, the people of Bisley have passed the story from one generation to the next. Even today, during the old May Day celebrations, local boys were once dressed as Tudor girls, a strange ritual that no one could quite explain, except the villagers who would smile and whisper, "Long live the Queen." Was it innocent folklore, or an echo of something real, something too dangerous for history to admit? What if the truth of England's golden age began with a lie told by frightened servants and a borrowed child? If you believe that even the smallest lie can change the course of history, share this story, because the truth doesn't always wear a crown. In the next chapter, we return to that fateful night inside Overcourt Manor, to the fever, the fear, and the desperate choice that may have rewritten royal blood itself. It began with a cough, a fever that rose through the night until the young princess could no longer speak. By morning, the house at Overcourt was silent, and the air carried not the scent of roses but of death. What followed was not an act of devotion but of terror, a single lie born from fear that would echo through history for centuries. The year was 1543, and King Henry VIII's temper was legend. He was not a man who forgave mistakes, he destroyed them. When word reached Elizabeth's servants that the king was coming to see his daughter, they trembled. How do you tell a monarch that his only child is dead? Inside the dim chamber of Overcourt Manor, candlelight flickered on the lifeless body of the little girl. The air was heavy with panic and guilt. Her nurse wept quietly in the corner. The steward whispered prayers, knowing they meant nothing now. Outside, the sound of hooves thundered on the road from London. Henry's entourage was near. In their desperation, one of the servants made a suggestion that would seem unthinkable: replace her. Among the children who played near the estate was a boy, delicate, fair-haired, and almost identical in age to the princess. His name has been lost to time, but in Bisley they call him the boy who became the queen. They bathed him, dressed him in the royal gowns, and placed Elizabeth's jewels around his neck. They braided his hair and powdered his face until even his reflection seemed to believe the lie. When King Henry arrived, the servants held their breath. He saw the princess standing at the far end of the room, pale from illness but alive. He smiled, relieved, and turned away. He did not notice the trembling hands or the silence of the servants. The lie had worked. But from that moment, there was no turning back. If they confessed, they would be executed. If they kept silent, they would live, but the world would never again know the truth. So the boy continued to live as Elizabeth. He was taught to speak softly, to move gracefully, to hide his body beneath layers of silk and lace. Every gesture was trained, every word rehearsed. The lie became the truth because it had to. And when the real princess was buried, some say in an unmarked grave beneath the churchyard, the earth kept her secret well. No record, no ceremony, not even a prayer. Only the whisper of the wind through the trees of Bisley, carrying the echo of a stolen life. Centuries later, that same wind still seems to whisper. Which one of them truly became the queen? Would you live your whole life as someone else if it meant surviving? But the lie did not end at Overcourt Manor. It grew stronger with every year, hidden behind ruffled collars and royal decrees. And when England's throne finally called for its princess, it was not Elizabeth Tudor who answered, a king who feared no one except his own legacy, a daughter who barely knew her father yet carried his blood, and perhaps his secret. What if the greatest deception in English history wasn't discovered, because the man who should have seen it never truly looked at her at all? King Henry VIII ruled with a temper as deadly as his sword. 6 wives, 2 executed, and a nation reshaped by his whims. This was a man who believed himself chosen by God, but even gods have blind spots. Elizabeth, the child he had once dismissed as a useless girl, grew up on the edges of his empire, more rumor than reality in her father's mind. After her mother's execution, the little princess was cast aside, declared illegitimate, and exiled from court life. To Henry, Elizabeth was an afterthought, a shadow in the royal bloodline. He rarely saw her, rarely spoke of her. And in that distance, the impossible became possible. When the child in Bisley died and another took her place, no one imagined the deception could survive a king's scrutiny. But Henry's indifference created the perfect disguise. He had already buried one wife and disowned a daughter. What was one more ghost in his court? When he did see Elizabeth again, she curtsied in silence, her eyes lowered, her voice trembling like any frightened child before her father. And the king, swollen with pride and age, smiled. He saw what he wanted to see: obedience, survival, a tutor. It is said that after that visit, Henry rode away satisfied, never suspecting that the daughter he spared was not his own. The servants exhaled for the first time in weeks, realizing that their lie had crossed the most dangerous threshold imaginable and survived. Years passed. The child grew into adolescence, her manner polished by tutors and courtiers. And though her mind was sharp, there was something about her that puzzled those around her. She carried herself differently, stiff, cautious, deliberate. Her laughter was rare, her temper fierce, her privacy absolute. No one dared question it, because questioning the royal bloodline was treason, and treason was death. Still, some noticed things they couldn't unsee: a deeper voice, a broader frame, a strange reluctance to show skin or illness. When she fell sick, her chambers were locked to all but her most loyal attendants. And as years turned to decades, the whispers followed her from manor to palace. The princess is not as she seems, but the truth was far too dangerous to speak aloud. In Tudor England, the executioner's blade silenced both liars and the honest alike. So they kept the secret generation after generation, even as Elizabeth's star began to rise. Can you imagine living in a palace, surrounded by servants, every eye fixed on you, while knowing that one glance too long could destroy everything? If you believe that silence can be more powerful than truth, share this story. Because sometimes survival demands a lie greater than any sin. But history has a cruel way of remembering what it's meant to forget. And when disease swept through London, the young Elizabeth was sent away once more. This time, not as a daughter in hiding, but as a future queen in waiting. Death had a scent in Tudor England: smoke, sweat, and rot. It crept through London's narrow streets like a ghost in daylight, swallowing whole families before sundown. And in that darkness, the royal family fled, carrying with them not just fear of the plague, but a secret already too heavy to bury. London, 1540s. The city stank of decay. The air itself seemed infected, dense, feverish, thick with flies. The sweating sickness had returned, a mysterious plague that killed within hours. Even nobles weren't spared. Servants collapsed in corridors, doctors died in their own homes. The city that once glowed with royal grandeur now sounded like a funeral. Church bells rang so often that silence itself became unsettling. For the Tudors, London was no longer the heart of the kingdom. It was a trap. So, one by one, the royal children were sent away to country estates, far from the disease. Among them, the girl they called Elizabeth. But what they didn't know was that this exile would protect more than just her health. It would protect a lie. In the countryside, the air was clean, the fields endless. No plague could reach the quiet village of Bisley. At least, that's what they believed. And there, behind the ivy walls of Overcourt Manor, the child who wasn't Elizabeth learned to become her. The servants who had once panicked were now conspirators by necessity. They burned every trace of the real princess, her clothes, her journals, even her toys. Only one relic remained, a small gold cross that the boy refused to part with. He wore it beneath his collar, a reminder of the child buried beneath the earth and the lie he now lived. Lessons began anew: voice training, handwriting, court etiquette. He was corrected when he walked too heavily, when his tone dropped too low. Grace, they whispered. A lady must move with grace, but some habits couldn't be erased. When other children curtsied, he bowed. When scolded, he clenched his fists like a soldier. And when alone, he cried, not for fear of discovery, but for the self that no longer existed. Outside, the plague raged on. Inside, a different sickness was spreading, the corruption of truth. Every day the lie became heavier, more intricate, more real. By the time word reached Bisley that the plague had passed, the servants no longer served a ghost of the princess, they served their queen-in-waiting. And as the years went on, this false Elizabeth grew confident, sharp-minded, cold, cautious, the traits of a survivor. When she finally returned to London, she was unrecognizable not just to the court but to history itself. Her skin was paler, her frame stronger, her demeanor changed. The sickly child was gone, replaced by a figure almost regal in composure and unnervingly masculine in presence. Whispers began. What happened to the princess in Bisley? How could a frail girl return as this? The servants who knew the truth said nothing, and those who suspected it disappeared. If a kingdom could rise on faith alone, could it not also rise on a lie? But even lies leave traces. And centuries later, deep beneath the soil of Bisley, something would be found, something that refused to stay buried. Centuries passed. Empires rose, kings died, and England forgot the whisper of the Bisley boy until a shovel struck stone. A single coffin, hidden beneath an old churchyard, was about to breathe life into a secret the crown thought it had buried forever. It was the late 1800s in the same quiet village where the legend began. Bisley had grown still, its cottages wrapped in ivy, its people haunted only by stories and superstition. That was, until the village vicar made a chilling discovery beneath the church grounds. A stone coffin containing the skeleton of a young girl, clothed in silk, her tiny bones wrapped in fragments of Tudor lace. He claimed she was the real Elizabeth Tudor, the one who died in secret, whose name was stolen by another. Word spread through Gloucestershire like wildfire. And for the first time in 400 years, the ground itself seemed to speak. The story might have faded again, but in the late 20th century, archaeologist Dr. Mark Horton from Bristol heard of the vicar's claim and traveled to Bisley to examine the site. What he found was both ordinary and extraordinary. The coffin was heavy and crude, carved from thick limestone. Its edges were weathered, its lid sealed with ancient earth. But what truly caught Horton's eye was not what was inside, but what was missing. At the bottom, small circular holes had been drilled into the stone, drain holes, a feature typical of medieval burial practices, not Roman as some had believed. It meant this coffin was crafted around the 13th or 14th century, 200 years before Elizabeth's supposed death in Bisley, a mismatch in time. But that didn't mean the bones didn't belong to her, because during the English Reformation, churches and abbeys were desecrated, coffins reused, tombs broken apart. In chaos, even a princess could be hidden in another's grave. Horton concluded the coffin was indeed medieval, yet he didn't dismiss the possibility that it might have been reused to hide a 16th century body. A body that needed to disappear quickly. When the villagers heard his findings, it reignited the legend. They whispered again of the Bisley boy, of frightened servants burying a child before sunrise, of a royal carriage passing through the mist, never stopping to look back. Tourists began to visit the churchyard, drawn by the promise of a secret too strange to ignore. Some swore they heard a child's laughter near the graves at dusk. Others said the ground itself hummed with guilt. Perhaps it was imagination, or perhaps something or someone still waited to be found. If you uncovered a coffin that could rewrite royal history, would you dare to open it? But the coffin was only the beginning, because in 1910, a man famous for bringing vampires to life would breathe new blood into the Bisley legend and make it immortal. Before Dracula ever haunted Transylvania, its creator was haunted by England's own ghost. A queen draped in silk and power, yet hiding something far darker beneath her crown. It wasn't blood that fascinated Bram Stoker. It was the horror of identity itself. London, 1910. The world was changing, electric light cut through the fog, and science began to challenge superstition. Yet, even in this age of progress, the Victorians still craved mystery. They read about seances, cursed tombs, and ancient secrets waiting to be unearthed. And in the heart of this obsession stood Bram Stoker, the man who gave the world Dracula, the eternal tale of beauty, deception, and hidden monstrosity. But after conquering the supernatural, Stoker turned his gaze toward something even more chilling: history itself. In his 1910 book Famous Impostors, Bram Stoker devoted an entire chapter to a story that had haunted Gloucestershire for centuries: the Bisley Boy. To Stoker, this wasn't just a tale, it was a mirror held up to human fear. The fear of falsehood, the fear that even history itself might be an illusion. He wrote of the subtle clues that had long been ignored: the princess's transformation after her return to court, from a fragile, sickly child into a tall, athletic, commanding presence. Her long fingers, her sharp wit, her refusal to marry. The strange change in her writing style, so refined, so unlike her earlier years. Stoker was too cautious to claim it as fact, but too intrigued to dismiss it as fiction. He wrote, "Wildly improbable as the Bisley story is, it is not impossible." That line alone was enough to ignite imaginations across Britain. Newspapers printed sensational headlines: "Was the Virgin Queen a man?" And readers devoured it, because beneath the shock, the story struck at something deeper. It wasn't just about gender or scandal, it was about deception at the highest level. The idea that a nation's identity could be built upon a single lie. Victorian England was obsessed with appearances. Women were expected to be modest, delicate, obedient. A woman who ruled alone without husband or heir unsettled them. And so, to explain her strength, her power, her refusal to fit the mold, they turned her into something else, something unnatural. Bram Stoker, perhaps unknowingly, gave voice to that fear. His version of Elizabeth became not merely a monarch, but a symbol of the unknown, beautiful, powerful, and terrifying. To him, the Virgin Queen and the vampire were not so different. Both wore masks, both lived in shadows, both were trapped between truth and immortality. What if Stoker wasn't trying to invent a legend, but to confess one? If you believe that every myth hides a reflection of our own fears, share this story. Because sometimes the monsters we create are born from the truths we refuse to face. But the legend didn't die with Stoker's pen. It only evolved. For when people began to look closer at Elizabeth's portraits, her hands, her posture, her stare, they began to wonder if he might have been right all along. Look closely at her portraits. Not the gown, not the jewels, but her hands. Long, sinewy, almost skeletal, the hands of someone who's wielded more than a fan. Her jaw strong, her shoulders broad, her eyes unyielding. Could England's most iconic queen have hidden more than royal authority behind her mask of powder and lace? In every museum and palace across Britain, her face still watches us. Stern, composed, untouchable. The face of Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, painted by those who dared not displease her, but perhaps who saw more than they were allowed to say. Underneath the layers of pearl and ruff, beneath the heavy crown and painted smile, some scholars and artists began to see a man's presence. Not in mockery, but in anatomy. Her contemporaries often described her as commanding, unyielding, masculine in manner. Her voice was deeper than most women's, her stride long and deliberate. And when she spoke, courtiers said her words could chill a room into silence. To a world that feared powerful women, Elizabeth wasn't merely extraordinary, she was unnatural. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, historians began to re-examine her image. Some fixated on her physical traits, her long fingers visible on statues and effigies, the thick layer of white lead makeup that might have concealed stubble or scars, and the high collars she wore, which could have hidden the lines of her neck or an Adam's apple. Even her love of hunting, fencing, and horseback riding seemed to defy expectations of Tudor womanhood. She was known to outride her male courtiers, her laughter echoing across the fields, as if daring the world to call her delicate. Then there was her makeup, thick, ghostly, almost theatrical. It was said to protect her from smallpox scars, but others whispered it protected something far deeper, that it was armor. One chronicler from her court once remarked, "Her beauty was that of authority, not softness." And in that simple line, centuries of fascination were born, because even if the Bisley Boy tale was never proven, Elizabeth's appearance fed it, fueled it, and gave it shape. To some, she was a woman too strong to be real. To others, a man too careful to be caught. Yet it's possible that none of these stories reflect deceit, but survival. In a time when women were possessions, Elizabeth turned herself into something no one could possess. She became untouchable. She was, in a way, both man and woman, the mother of her people, the father of her nation. And maybe that's what made her so feared, so loved, so unknowable. Was Elizabeth hiding her identity or transcending it? Tell me, does power make us more than human or less? But behind every rumor of masculinity and disguise lay a deeper fear, not of the queen's body, but of her power. For in the centuries that followed, men would rewrite her story to make sense of a woman they could not control. History didn't just remember Elizabeth, it tried to explain her. Because for men of the 19th century, a woman who ruled without fear, without a husband, and without apology was unthinkable. And when the world cannot understand a woman's power, it rewrites her story as horror. It was the Victorian era, an age that worshipped propriety but feared independence. Women were expected to be gentle, silent, obedient, their worth measured not by their mind, but by their marriage. And yet here was Elizabeth I, commanding armies, defying popes, silencing men who dared question her. To the Victorians, she wasn't a symbol of triumph. She was a threat reborn through memory. Bram Stoker's Bisley Boy story did more than fuel gossip. It revealed how a patriarchal society processed the unthinkable, a woman who wielded power better than any man. In the late 1800s, British historians were obsessed with identity and morality. They dissected monarchs not through facts but through their ability to fit the gender ideals of the time. Kings were celebrated for strength, queens for virtue, but Elizabeth had both, and that broke every rule. Instead of admiring her dominance, Victorian thinkers twisted it into something unnatural. They called her masculine, cold, unwomanly. They began asking, how could a true woman be so powerful, yet so alone? The simplest answer was also the cruelest. They claimed she wasn't truly a woman at all. From academic journals to evening newspapers, speculation turned into sensationalism. Caricatures painted her with hard eyes and clenched fists. Writers described her as a half-human riddle, a being suspended between genders. And thus, the legend of the Main Queen thrived. It wasn't just Elizabeth's story they were rewriting. It was a warning to every woman who dared to stand apart. Victorian society couldn't imagine a woman who chose solitude over marriage, intellect over romance, leadership over submission. So they did what frightened people always do. They turned her into a monster. And yet, in doing so, they revealed something about themselves. The Bisley Boy myth wasn't proof of Elizabeth's deceit. It was proof of the world's fear. Fear that a woman could rule better than any man. Fear that she didn't need saving. Fear that she didn't need them. What if the true horror of the Virgin Queen wasn't her secret, but her freedom? But long before the Victorians judged her, Elizabeth had already learned what it meant to be betrayed by love and condemned by birth. Her story didn't begin in mystery. It began in blood, before she was a legend, before the whispers of imposture or immortality. Elizabeth was just a child born from forbidden love, a love that would build a kingdom, and then destroy it with a single swing of an axe. It was 1533. The Tudor court glittered with gold, music, and ambition. But beneath its splendor beat a dangerous pulse, the desire of one man who would reshape England itself. King Henry VIII had grown tired of his queen, Catherine of Aragon. After years of marriage, she had failed to give him what he wanted most, a son. And then came Anne Boleyn, brilliant, bold, and unlike any woman he had ever met. Anne didn't bow, she challenged. She spoke her mind with wit and fire, captivating the king and enraging his court. For her, Henry broke from the Church of Rome. He declared himself supreme head of the Church of England and married her in defiance of the Pope. England was reborn in scandal, and from that scandal a daughter was born. On September 7, 1533, in the Palace of Greenwich, a cry echoed through the halls. The birth of Princess Elizabeth. Henry had expected a son. Letters had already been drafted to announce a prince. When he saw the small, swaddled girl, his smile faded, but the kingdom still celebrated, for now. Anne believed she could still secure her place. She was young, confident, and certain that more children would come. But fate and Henry's temper had other plans. The years that followed were filled with tension and loss. Anne's next pregnancies ended in tragedy, miscarriages that shattered her dreams and deepened Henry's impatience. The court grew colder toward her. Enemies whispered that she was cursed. And then one final miscarriage, a stillborn son. It was the moment Henry's love turned to hatred. Soon Anne was accused of adultery, witchcraft, even incest, crimes so absurd yet so deadly that few dared defend her. 5 men were executed. And on May 19, 1536, Anne Boleyn was led to the scaffold in the Tower of London. Witnesses said she stood tall, serene, her dark eyes calm as she prayed for the king who condemned her. Then the French swordsman raised his blade, swift, clean, merciful. In a single motion, the woman who had defied a nation was gone, and with her death, her daughter's fate was sealed. Elizabeth, barely 3 years old, was declared illegitimate, stripped of her title, and erased from the royal line. For most, that would have been the end of her story. But somehow, through exile and silence, the little girl survived. Perhaps that's where her caution was born, in knowing that love could cost a head, and that truth in her family was always negotiable. Would you learn to trust again if the first lesson of your life was betrayal? But Anne's death was only the beginning. For in losing her mother, Elizabeth gained her most enduring lesson, that in Tudor England, love and loyalty were merely instruments of survival. Every child learns love from their parents, but Elizabeth learned something else, that in the Tudor court, love could kill you faster than any sword, and betrayal was the only inheritance worth keeping. After Anne Boleyn's death, the palace corridors that once echoed with music turned cold and silent. Elizabeth was no longer princess. She was Lady Elizabeth, a living reminder of her mother's disgrace, tolerated only because execution was inconvenient. King Henry VIII remarried quickly, seeking the son Anne had failed to give him. And when Jane Seymour gave birth to Prince Edward, the kingdom rejoiced. The future of the Tudor line was secure. But for Elizabeth, it meant only one thing: she was expendable, a forgotten child shuffled from one manor to another. She learned early that silence was safer than truth, obedience was protection, and distance was survival. Elizabeth's childhood was a dance on a knife's edge. She watched queens rise and fall with frightening speed. Jane Seymour dead after childbirth, Anne of Cleves divorced, Catherine Howard executed for adultery. Each wife was a ghost that whispered a lesson: do not trust the crown that kisses you. Henry, aging and paranoid, grew crueler with time. He saw enemies in every corner, and affection as weakness. To him, his daughters were chess pieces, and Elizabeth, sharp, silent, watchful, became his most dangerous piece of all. In her solitude, she studied Latin, philosophy, and politics, subjects deemed improper for women. Her tutors spoke of Cicero, Machiavelli, and the art of ruling with both heart and cunning. And she listened like someone who already knew she would need to rule to survive. But the world was not done testing her. When Henry died in 1547, Elizabeth was only 13. Her stepmother, Catherine Parr, took her in, and soon after remarried the dashing and dangerous Thomas Seymour. What followed would haunt Elizabeth forever. Seymour was bold, handsome, and ambitious, a man who knew charm could be sharper than steel. He would slip into her room at dawn, laughing, teasing, his hands too familiar for a guardian's touch. Witnesses recalled his games with the young princess, cutting her gown to ribbons in jest, embracing her in the garden, tickling her until she cried with confusion and shame. At first, Catherine laughed it off. Then she began to see it, the look in her husband's eyes, the trembling in Elizabeth's. Jealousy flared, and for the second time, Elizabeth was sent away in disgrace. This time not because of her mother's sins, but because of a man's desire. Months later, Thomas Seymour was arrested for treason. He had plotted to kidnap the king and marry Elizabeth, making himself ruler through her. When he was executed, Elizabeth did not weep, but those around her said she changed, becoming colder, wiser, unreachable. She had learned what her mother never could, that in a world ruled by men, love was a weapon and she would never again be its victim. If you were her, would you ever trust affection again, knowing it once wore the face of death? But Elizabeth's story was only beginning, for the throne was now closer than ever, and so were the eyes that wanted her dead. Power doesn't just tempt, it hunts. And as Elizabeth drew closer to the throne, she realized that every smile in court hid a blade. For in Tudor England, the deadliest wars were not fought on battlefields, but at the dinner table. After Thomas Seymour's execution, the court watched Elizabeth with suspicion and fascination. She was young, beautiful, and educated, too educated. And though her father was gone, his ghost still ruled every corridor. The throne passed to her half-brother, Edward VI, Henry's long-awaited son. He was only 9 years old, a child king guided by ambitious men who whispered of reform, religion, and control. For Elizabeth, this was both safety and danger. Safety because her claim to the throne seemed distant. Danger because every claimant was a threat. In this world, blood wasn't thicker than water. It was fuel. The death of Henry VIII in 1547 had left a kingdom fractured by faith. Protestants and Catholics clashed in sermons and backrooms, each side desperate to shape England's soul. Elizabeth, brilliant and cautious, learned to walk between them. She never spoke too boldly, never prayed too openly. Every word was a calculation, every silence an act of survival. Then came the first tremor. Edward grew sickly. His face turned pale, his coughs heavy with blood. And behind the scenes, powerful families began to circle like wolves. The Dudleys, the Greys, and the remnants of the Boleyn faction. Each dreamed of shaping the next ruler. But one woman stood in their way, Mary Tudor, Elizabeth's half-sister, a fierce Catholic whose faith burned brighter than reason. When Edward died at just 15, chaos erupted. The Dudleys placed Lady Jane Grey on the throne, a fragile teenager who ruled for only 9 days before Mary's supporters stormed London. Jane was executed, her youth no shield against politics. And in her place, Mary I, Henry's eldest, became queen. For Elizabeth, it was a moment of dread. She had survived her father. She had survived Seymour. But could she survive her sister? Mary saw her as a rival, a Protestant symbol for rebellion. When uprisings broke out across the country, the Queen's Council accused Elizabeth of treason. In the spring of 1554, she was taken to the Tower of London, the same fortress where her mother had died. The same ravens still circled its cold spires. Witnesses said that as Elizabeth entered the tower, she touched the stone walls and whispered, "Much suspected by many, but I am innocent of all." For weeks she waited in darkness. Each knock at her door could have been her executioner. Each sunrise could have been her last. But unlike Anne Boleyn, Elizabeth did not break. She wrote, read, and prayed. And when Mary finally ordered her release, Elizabeth stepped into the sunlight changed. She had seen death, and it had blinked first. That walk from the tower was more than freedom. It was a coronation of spirit. The girl who had once been forgotten was now forged in fear. Her enemies began to call her the she-wolf. Her supporters called her England's hope. And in her silence, she called herself only one thing: ready. Would you forgive the world that locked you in a cell if that same world would soon kneel before you? If you believe that those who have walked through the dark deserve the brightest crown, share this story. Because the greatest thrones are built not on privilege, but on pain. But the tower had left its mark. Elizabeth had escaped the shadow of death, only to face the shadow of love. For in her rise to power, one man would test her resolve more than any king or queen ever could. Every ruler faces temptation. But for Elizabeth I, temptation wore a smile and called her my queen. It wasn't war, rebellion, or betrayal that nearly destroyed her reign. It was love. And his name was Robert Dudley. When Elizabeth ascended the throne in 1558, she was just 25, radiant, sharp, and fiercely independent. England, weary from years of religious bloodshed, looked to her like a miracle. But a queen without a king was both an inspiration and a threat. Whispers filled the court. Who will she marry? Who will claim her crown? Ambassadors offered princes and kings from across Europe, but Elizabeth's heart had already chosen. Robert Dudley, her childhood friend, her confidant, her one forbidden comfort in a world built on suspicion. He was everything she could not have, because to love him was to risk losing everything. Robert Dudley was no stranger to ambition. Handsome, daring, and clever, he had risen from noble roots into royal favor with the ease of a man born for danger. When Elizabeth became queen, she made him master of the horse, a title that kept him always close. Where she rode, he rode. Where she walked, he followed. Where she smiled, he bowed, and the world noticed. Courtiers began to whisper. Ministers exchanged glances. Even foreign ambassadors sent secret letters warning, "The queen is bewitched by her horsemen." Dudley's wife, Amy Robsart, lived far from court, ill and alone. Her absence only deepened the scandal. The people murmured, what if the virgin queen was no virgin at all? And then, on a September morning in 1560, Amy was found dead at the foot of a staircase, her neck broken. The court erupted. Was it an accident? A suicide? Or had England's queen and her lover committed murder for love? The inquiry ruled death by misfortune, but suspicion lingered like smoke. Elizabeth, shattered, distanced herself from Dudley. To marry him now would mean ruin. To abandon him would mean heartbreak. Yet she could not let him go. For years, their relationship burned quietly. Letters filled with longing, glances exchanged across the throne room. She once wrote, "You are like my little dog. When they see you, they know I am near." But beneath her affection was the weight of her crown. Elizabeth had seen what love did to her mother, what desire did to her stepfather, and what weakness did to kings. So she made a choice few could bear. She chose power over passion, duty over desire. Still, Dudley remained by her side, a constant presence through victories and defeats, through rebellion, plague, and age. When he died in 1588, she locked herself away for days, refusing food or counsel. On his final letter, found in her chambers years later, she had written 2 words, his last. Perhaps she never stopped loving him, or perhaps she loved him because he was the one thing she could never claim. Would you trade a crown for the only person who made you feel human? But Dudley's death did not end the rumors. For years after, whispers claimed the queen bore his secret child, a son hidden from history, whose existence could have rewritten the Tudor line. When a ship ran aground off the coast of Spain in 1587, a young man emerged, claiming to be the illegitimate son of Queen Elizabeth I and Robert Dudley. His name was Arthur Dudley. If his story was true, he wasn't just another imposter. He was England's hidden king. Elizabeth was nearing the twilight of her reign. Her people adored her, but the crown carried a haunting irony. The virgin queen who had no heir. For decades, her unmarried state had been both her shield and her curse. And yet, rumors persisted, rumors that she had given birth, not in the light of royal ceremony, but in the secrecy of fear and love. It began as whispers in the corridors of power, then echoed through taverns, courts, and even foreign embassies, that Elizabeth had once vanished from public view, sick and pale, and returned with the quiet strength of a mother who could never speak her truth. The story of Arthur Dudley began in 1587, when Spanish officials detained an Englishman rescued from a shipwreck near Santander. He claimed to be 27 years old. Born around 1560, the same year Robert Dudley's wife Amy died mysteriously. When questioned, Arthur told a story that stunned his captors. He said he was raised in Worcestershire by a man named Robert Southern, who confessed on his deathbed that Arthur was not his true son, but the secret child of Queen Elizabeth and Lord Robert Dudley. According to his account, he had been hidden as an infant, sent to the countryside to be raised in secrecy, with payments discreetly delivered by royal agents. He had lived in quiet anonymity until fate, and a storm at sea, cast him into the world's gaze. The Spanish court was intrigued. England's virgin queen with a secret son. If true, it could upend the legitimacy of the entire Tudor line. They interrogated him for weeks, and the more he spoke, the harder it became to dismiss him. Arthur knew things no commoner could have known. Details of the queen's private chambers, the temperament of her council, and the habits of her beloved horseman, Robert Dudley. He even bore a striking resemblance to both. Tall, refined, sharp-featured, with the same reddish-gold hair that Elizabeth had once shared with her father, Henry Roman VIII. The Spanish ambassador wrote, "If this man lies, then he lies most skillfully, for his every manner and speech bear the shadow of truth." And yet, the English government made no effort to retrieve him. No denial, no statement, no outrage, just silence. A silence louder than any confession. Some say the Queen's advisors knew the danger, that acknowledging his existence would destroy her carefully crafted image of chastity. Others believe Elizabeth herself ordered that the matter never be spoken of again. Arthur disappeared shortly after his interrogation. No record of his death, no burial, no trial. Only a rumor that he was quietly executed or perhaps quietly protected. The legend endured because it fit. The timing, the secrecy, the Queen's strange illness in 1560, and that one phrase she had whispered to her council long after Dudley's death, "I am married to England." Perhaps it wasn't just devotion she was declaring, but guilt. If the Virgin Queen truly bore a child in secret, then what else might she have buried beneath her crown? And so, the legend of Arthur Dudley faded into shadow. But one question still lingers. If Elizabeth had a child, where did that bloodline go? Could the heir of England still walk among us? They called her Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, the woman who defied popes, kings, and time itself. But in the winter of 1603, as her breath grew shallow and her hands trembled like dying leaves, Queen Elizabeth, I gave one final command. A command whispered through cracked lips. "No man shall touch my body." What was she hiding? After 44 years on the throne, the woman who once glowed like fire had become a ghost. Her golden hair, now brittle and gray, was hidden beneath layers of wigs and jewels. The courtiers who once feared her now tiptoed through her silence. She no longer ate, no longer slept. At night, she sat motionless on her throne, staring into nothing, her eyes heavy with secrets no priest could absolve. The empire she built was safe, but her soul restless. It was said that she refused to rest in bed, muttering to her maids, "If I lie down, I shall never rise again." She was right. In the final weeks of her life, Elizabeth's strength faded, but her will remained iron. Doctors begged to examine her, she refused. Priests begged to anoint her, she turned away. Even her most trusted servants dared not touch her. The Virgin Queen, who had ruled England with an iron grace, was now at war with her own body. Those who stood by her bedside spoke of a strange fear, as if she dreaded not death but discovery. Some said she would not allow her physicians to undress her, nor her attendants to prepare her body for embalming. Her final order was absolute. "Let no blade, nor hand, nor man defile me in death." To some, it was modesty. To others, it was proof. Had she hidden something physical, an imperfection, an anomaly, or even evidence of the rumors that had haunted her life? Theories blossomed like wild roses after her death. Some said she bore the marks of complete androgen insensitivity syndrome, a condition in which a person born male develops a female appearance, the ultimate secret of the Virgin Queen. Others whispered she carried scars from smallpox, or wounds from years of tightening corsets and powdered masks that cracked her skin. And then there were those who believed her refusal to be touched was not fear, but penance, that beneath the crown of England lived a heart that had loved and lost, a woman haunted by the memory of a man she could never marry, and perhaps a child she could never claim. As the days passed, Elizabeth grew weaker. When her counselors asked who should succeed her, she raised her trembling hand and made a motion, a single, deliberate gesture. It pointed north, to Scotland, to James VI, the son of her cousin Mary, Queen of Scots, the woman she had executed years before. The irony was divine or cruel or both. The Virgin Queen who never bore a child would leave her throne, to the child of the woman she had killed. On March 24, 1603, the last Tudor monarch took her final breath. Witnesses said her face softened, her lips curved faintly into a smile. Perhaps she finally saw her mother again. Or perhaps she was meeting the one man who had waited for her all these years, Robert Dudley. Her body lay untouched for hours, and when at last they dressed her for burial, they said her skin was cold, smooth, and pale as marble, perfect, untouchable, just as she had lived. The woman who called herself married to England had finally gone to meet the only lover she ever truly had, history. Do you think Elizabeth's purity was a myth or her final act of power? But death was not the end of Elizabeth's reign. It was only the beginning of her myth. Centuries later, Archaeologists, doctors, and writers would continue to chase her ghost, searching for answers in bone and blood. Centuries after Queen Elizabeth I took her final breath, her story still refuses to rest. From scientists studying her bones to filmmakers resurrecting her image, the Virgin Queen has never truly died, because when history buries the truth, curiosity becomes the shovel. Westminster Abbey, 2024. Tourists pass the marble tomb of Queen Elizabeth I, its Latin inscription gleaming faintly beneath the cathedral lights. Partners in throne and grave, here we sleep, Elizabeth and Mary. But even as flowers are laid on her resting place, historians, doctors, and skeptics continue to ask, who truly lies beneath the stone? A woman who defied men, or a monarch who defied biology? Elizabeth's afterlife has been as turbulent as her reign. Every century, new technology, new evidence, and new obsessions breathe life into her ghost, each trying to answer one impossible question. Who was she really? For decades, her body has remained untouched, but her mystery has been dissected countless times. In the 20th century, forensic anthropologists began reanalyzing portraits and descriptions of Elizabeth. Some pointed to features consistent with androgen insensitivity syndrome: long limbs, tall stature, delicate bones, lack of heirs. Others rejected the theory entirely, arguing that Elizabeth's celibacy was not biological but strategic. A queen's purity, after all, was her armor, the one thing no man could claim. Psychologists saw her differently. They spoke of a woman scarred by her parents' tragedy, shaped by betrayal, haunted by execution. Dr. Rita Bakken wrote, "Her refusal to marry was not rejection but rebellion. She would never let her life be decided by another hand." Historians, meanwhile, debated the Bisley Boy tale with renewed vigor. Some dismissed it as folklore. Others found peculiar clues: the masculine jawlines in her portraits, the consistent effort to conceal her throat and hands, and the strange insistence, even in death, that no one touch her body. Then came modern digital forensics. Using AI facial mapping, researchers compared dozens of Elizabeth's portraits, painted across 4 decades of her reign. The results were shocking. Slight differences in bone structure and symmetry suggested that her face had subtly changed over time, beyond what age alone could explain. Was it artistic style, political propaganda, or something more? Even DNA science tried to intervene. Requests were made to test her remains and compare them to known Boleyn descendants, but the church refused, calling her tomb sacred and sealed. Her secrets, it seemed, would remain locked away, just as she commanded. Meanwhile, in culture, the Virgin Queen lived on, in books, plays, and films that turned her life into legend. From Kate Blanchett's fiery grace to Helen Mirren's aging brilliance, each portrayal reinvented her: saint, seductress, strategist, survivor. And yet, in every version, one thing remained constant: that haunting loneliness behind her eyes. Because perhaps the greatest truth about Elizabeth is not what she hid from the world, but what she gave up for it: love, freedom, and peace. Maybe her real secret was never in her blood or her body, but in how she carried the unbearable weight of being both woman and monarch, and refused to be less than either. If you believe that legends never die, that they simply change shape with each century, share this story, because history isn't written in stone. It's written in the silence between heartbeats. 400 years later, her shadow still lingers, in every woman who leads, in every soul who refuses to yield. The Virgin Queen may have died without an heir, but her true legacy lives on, not in blood but in defiance. 4 centuries have passed since her heart stopped beating, yet Queen Elizabeth I still rules, not from a throne of gold, but from the minds of every woman who refuses to kneel. Her empire may have ended, but her defiance became eternal. Elizabeth's story did not end with her death. It transformed. From a woman who had to hide her pain, she became a symbol for every generation that dared to rewrite its own destiny. She was the first English queen to rule alone, the first to declare herself sovereign in body, mind, and spirit. Her motto, Semper Idem, meaning always the same, wasn't just a phrase, it was a promise that no matter what history demanded of her gender, she would never bend. And centuries later, the world still echoes that vow. Elizabeth's reign laid the foundation for modern Britain. The navy she built became the seed of an empire. The church she stabilized defined centuries of politics, and the identity she crafted gave birth to the concept of England itself. But her true legacy wasn't in policy or conquest, it was in the power of image. Elizabeth mastered the art of performance long before cameras existed. Every portrait, every speech, every silence was calculated. She became both woman and myth, a living paradox of purity and strength, grace and steel. Her virginity was not a prison, it was a political weapon. By refusing marriage, she denied men control over her throne. She transformed what was once seen as weakness, female solitude, into divine authority. She told her people she was married to England, and in doing so, she gave birth to a nation's faith in its queen. Modern historians call this branding, but to Elizabeth it was survival, and that survival has rippled through time. Every woman who leads a nation, every artist who shapes her image, every individual who chooses purpose over expectation, they carry a spark of Elizabeth's rebellion. When Margaret Thatcher stood at the dispatch box, when Queen Elizabeth II swore her lifelong duty, when women in boardrooms, classrooms, and battlefields refused to be silenced, that was the echo of the lioness. Even in pop culture, her ghost lives on, from Shakespeare's heroines to modern films. Elizabeth is the archetype of power with a human heart, a reminder that strength and femininity were never opposites, only misunderstood companions. She didn't need heirs to shape the world. She became her own lineage. Perhaps that's the greatest secret of all. Elizabeth never needed to be remembered. She made sure she could never be forgotten. In the final chapter, The Face Behind the Crown, we step away from the myth to uncover the woman herself, Elizabeth, not the queen, and ask, what does it truly cost to be eternal? Strip away the jewels, remove the lace, the crown, the throne. What's left isn't a monarch, but a woman who was never allowed to be one. This is not the story of Queen Elizabeth I. This is the story of Elizabeth Tudor, the human being the world was never meant to see. For most of her life, Elizabeth was a symbol, not a person. To her people, she was Gloriana, chosen by God. To her enemies, she was the heretic queen, a woman who defied marriage and the church alike. But behind every performance, every carefully crafted word, was a quiet ache, a longing that history rarely dares to mention. She had known death before she had known love, known betrayal before she had known trust, and for 44 years she ruled not through affection, but through fear, intellect, and solitude. What happens to a soul when it belongs to the world, but never to itself? Those closest to Elizabeth often spoke of her contradictions. She could be radiant one moment, laughing, charming, witty beyond measure, and icy the next, her voice sharp enough to silence a room. Her maid said she would sometimes wander her chambers alone at night, speaking softly to portraits of her mother, Anne Boleyn. Others claimed she wept when no one was watching, not for her kingdom, but for the girl who had once played freely in her father's gardens. Every decision she made was measured by its weight in survival. To marry would be to risk her crown, to love would be to invite ruin. And so she chose the only path left to her, to become untouchable, but power came with a price. Her body bore the burden of her armor, layers of white lead makeup that poisoned her skin, corsets that stole her breath, wigs that hid her thinning hair. Her beauty was no longer vanity, it was camouflage. The court adored her radiance, but few realized that every morning, it took hours of paint and pain to create it. When one servant once saw her barefaced, he described her as hauntingly human, and perhaps that was her greatest sin, that the Virgin Queen was not divine but heartbreakingly mortal. Even in her letters, the cracks showed. To one trusted advisor, she wrote, "Though I be a queen, I am also a woman, and would that I were but one or the other." She loved deeply Dudley, her people, her country, but she loved from a distance because to let anyone too close was to risk becoming vulnerable again, and vulnerability in her world was death. So she built walls of ceremony and gold and ruled behind them like a goddess made of glass, unbreakable to all except herself. Would you still envy her crown if you knew it came with eternal loneliness? And yet, even through her pain, she left behind something no other monarch ever could: a reflection of strength that transcended her time and reshaped how the world saw women forever. In the final part, The Immortal Crown, why Elizabeth's story still matters, we explore how her choices, sacrifices, and silence became the blueprint for every woman who dares to lead today. Centuries fade, empires fall, but her shadow still stands, tall, proud, and untouchable. Queen Elizabeth may have died 400 years ago, but every woman who leads, every soul who refuses to yield, still walks in the light of her crown. When people speak of Elizabeth, they often speak of the past, of Tudor England, of lace collars and courtly dances. But her story was never trapped in time. It was prophecy. She ruled when women were forbidden to rule, commanded men who were raised to command her, and built an empire out of intellect, not bloodline. In a world that told her she couldn't, she replied, quietly but fiercely, "Watch me." Her voice may have faded in the wind of history, but her message never has. Elizabeth's reign did more than define an era, it rewrote what power looked like. Before her, queens were defined by whom they married. After her, they were defined by what they became. She showed the world that leadership could wear a woman's face, and not a gentle one, a fierce, calculating, intelligent face that demanded respect rather than affection. In modern times, her influence can be felt everywhere. In Margaret Thatcher's iron will, in Angela Merkel's silent resilience, in Jacinda Ardern's compassion under crisis, and in the quiet strength of every woman who refuses to apologize for her ambition. Even beyond politics, her spirit bleeds into art, literature, and culture. Filmmakers and writers still chase her contradictions. How one person could be both tender and terrifying, lonely yet loved, flawed yet flawless in legacy. Elizabeth taught the world a paradox that still defines leadership today, that true power isn't domination, it's endurance. She didn't conquer through violence. She conquered through vision, patience, and the manipulation of image. She turned vulnerability into mythology. And that's why she still rules our imagination. To this day, historians argue about her secrets. Was she hiding her gender, her scars, her child? But maybe she wasn't hiding at all. Maybe she was teaching us that identity is never one thing. She could be both woman and ruler, sinner and saint, myth and human. And in that contradiction lies her immortality. Perhaps Elizabeth's greatest achievement was not what she built for England, but what she built for everyone who came after her, the right to exist beyond definition. Her reign ended in 1603, but her legacy has never stopped evolving. And perhaps that's the true mark of immortality, to be reborn in every era, in every woman who stands alone and says, "I will not bow." In the epilogue, The Mirror and the Monarch, we reflect on the timeless question Elizabeth leaves us with. Is power the mask we wear, or the truth we finally accept? Stand before her portrait. Look into those eyes, sharp, unreadable, alive even now. They say paintings capture truth, but what if her gaze isn't reflecting the past? What if it's looking straight at you and asking the question she never could answer herself? Who are you when the crown comes off? Centuries later, Queen Elizabeth no longer reigns over England, but she reigns over our imagination. Her life has become a mirror held up to humanity's oldest struggle, the balance between power and peace, image and identity, legend and loneliness. Historians study her strategies. Feminists celebrate her defiance. Psychologists analyze her isolation. And artists, they paint her again and again, as though by tracing her face they might finally uncover her soul. But no one ever truly does, because perhaps she never wanted us to. Elizabeth's story is not just history, it's prophecy. She lived in an age when women had no agency, yet she ruled a nation that reshaped the world. She was the daughter of a condemned queen, the survivor of a father's wrath, the monarch who refused to be owned by any man or god. She turned her trauma into armor, her solitude into strategy, her myth into immortality. And in doing so, she became something greater than a queen. She became an idea that still haunts us today. When modern women are told to be strong but soft, ambitious but humble, they are walking the same impossible line she once walked. When leaders hide their exhaustion behind smiles, they are echoing her mask of control. And when we choose purpose over comfort, truth over approval, We are, in a way, answering her call. Elizabeth's crown was not made of gold, it was made of sacrifice. Every decision she made chipped away at her humanity, until all that remained was the role. But perhaps that's the price of greatness, to give up being known in order to never be forgotten. Maybe that's why her story still grips us, because we all wear our own crowns, and we all wonder what they're costing us. If you've ever felt torn between who the world wants you to be and who you truly are, share this story, because Elizabeth's crown was heavy not from gold, but from the weight of pretending she didn't feel it. The Virgin Queen remains an enigma, not because of what she hid, but because of what she revealed about us. Her secret was never just her body, her air, or her love. It was this, that even the most powerful soul in history was, in the end, only human. And maybe that's why her eyes still follow you from every portrait, reminding you that the search for truth, power, and purpose isn't just hers, it's ours. This was Horrific Secrets of the Virgin Queen. Her crown may have turned to dust, but her story will never die.